In an industry that lost roughly half its jobs over 3 decades, one steel company never laid off a single worker for lack of work. Not during the worst recession in 80 years. Not when its own production fell to a third of normal capacity. This was not generosity, it was not luck. It came from a decision made decades earlier about a question most companies never really ask. When a worker gets more productive, who actually gets paid for it? In the late 1960s, Ken Iverson ran the only profitable division of a struggling company on the edge of bankruptcy. Rising steel prices from suppliers were eating into his margins, so Iverson proposed something unusual. Build the company's own steel mill, using a technology barely tested in the United States. Electric arc furnaces, which melted scrap metal into new steel using electricity, instead of the massive blast furnaces the industry relied on. Were already used in Europe but were widely doubted by American steelmakers. Traditional blast furnace plants cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build. Iverson's mini mill, financed with a $6 million bank loan, was a fraction of that. In 1969, the plant opened in Darlington, South Carolina, staffed largely by workers with no steelmaking experience at all, sharecroppers, carpenters, teachers. The technology did not work smoothly at first. For roughly 18 months, equipment broke down repeatedly. Workers unfamiliar with molten steel sometimes fled in fear when furnaces malfunctioned. Earnings collapsed. Rival executives at established steel companies were openly skeptical the mini mill would ever produce steel at scale. What kept the plant moving through that period was the same compensation structure Iverson had already put in place. Small teams of workers earned weekly bonuses tied directly to how much usable steel they produced, on top of a base wage lower than the industry average. Maintenance was not someone else's problem. Maintenance personnel were tied into the same production system, and when the equipment stopped, the bonus stopped with it. Getting the plant running again affected everyone's paycheck. Some historians of the company argue this period, more than any strategic plan, is what proved the mechanism actually worked, not as a slogan, but as something built into the daily math of a paycheck. As Nucor grew, the compensation structure Iverson built around that early crisis became formal company policy. Production workers were grouped into small teams, and bonuses were calculated on actual output against the target, with no subjective judgment involved. The numbers were posted before anyone opened their pay envelope. In later years, those bonuses often ran well above 100% of a worker's base pay. The system could cut both ways. At some facilities, attendance was built into the production formula, meaning one worker's absence could affect what the rest of the team earned for the week. Supervisors and staff not directly on the factory floor were covered by a separate plan tied to each plant's return on assets, with bonuses worth up to a quarter of their salary. Senior executives had the largest share of their own pay at risk of all. Iverson himself flew economy class and worked without a company car, dining room, or reserved parking space. Details that, whether or not they moved the needle financially, reinforced that the same rules applied all the way to the top. Corporate headquarters, even after Nucor grew into a Fortune 500 company, employed only a few dozen people. Layers of management between a furnace operator and the chief executive numbered around 4. In 1989, Nucor placed a similarly unconventional bet. It committed to building a plant in Crawfordsville, Indiana, based on thin slab casting, a process for making flat-rolled steel, historically the most capital-intensive and technically demanding category, using far less equipment than traditional methods required. According to accounts from the period, a rival company circulated an internal report running to roughly 100 pages explaining why the approach would not work. Crawfordsville succeeded, and thin slab casting was adopted by steelmakers around the world in the years that followed. The clearest test of the whole system came decades later, during the recession of 2008 and 2009. Steel demand collapsed, and Nucor's own production fell to roughly a third of its normal capacity. The company lost money that year for the first time in its history as a steel producer. Every major American steel competitor announced layoffs. Nucor did not lay off a single one of its roughly 20,000 employees. Instead, hours were cut, and production bonuses, which for many workers had made up well over half their income, largely disappeared, cutting take-home pay by as much as 40% for some employees. The company's own regulatory filings describe the underlying philosophy in 4 words: Share the pain, share the gain. According to a plant manager quoted by a local newspaper at the time, workers understood they were sharing the pain the way they had always shared the gains, and they kept their jobs and benefits in return. By the following decade, industry estimates suggested that roughly 2/3 of an average Nucor worker's pay was variable, tied to performance, compared to closer to 1/5 at several competing steel producers. Though the precision of that specific comparison is harder to independently verify than the scale of Nucor's own bonus structure. What is not in dispute is the structure itself. As recently as 2026, the company's own job postings cited an average production bonus of around 65% on top of base pay. The company also chose to remain non-union throughout this period, a structural detail that shaped how the compensation system could operate but is not, on its own, the mechanism this story is about. Nucor did not outperform the rest of the American steel industry because of a single bonus program, and it did not survive on unproven technology alone. It built a system where the technology, the flat management structure, and the incentives reinforced one another, so that when one part of the system came under pressure, the other parts absorbed the shock instead of collapsing with it. Job security was not simply a value statement. The pay structure made protecting each other's paychecks and protecting the plant part of the same daily decision.